Good afternoon, or good morning to some of you, and welcome to Motivation, the Secret Sauce Revealed webinar session. Before we get started, I have a couple of announcements. Everyone is in listen-only mode, and everyone has the opportunity to ask questions. Please use the question chat box to submit your questions. It is advised that you close down all windows on your computer to help with the speed of the presentation and the connection of the webinar. We are pleased today to have Dr. Rich Gassaway instructing this session. Dr. Gassaway has served 33 years as a fire and EMS professional, including 22 years as a fire chief. In addition to his dedication to emergency services, Dr. Gassaway has a second passion, a pursuit to understand how research and findings in neuroscience can improve first responder safety. A prolific author and speaker, Dr. Gassaway has written 4 books on situational awareness and decision making, and has authored over 350 journal and website articles on first responder safety topics. He has presented programs on situational awareness and decision making under stress to more than 30,000 first responders throughout the U.S., Canada, UK, Hong Kong, China, and Australia. At this time, it's my pleasure to turn over the program to Dr. Gassaway.
Thank you, Tom, and thanks everybody for tuning in and giving me the opportunity to have a little bit of time with you this afternoon to talk about motivation and the secret sauce of motivation and revealing the secret behind motivation. Tom had done my introduction, so I won't belabor that point, other than to say I've been in the fire service for 30 years, 18 years as a fire chief, and a few years as a company officer in addition to that, and have dedicated my life to trying to understand human behavior, especially as it relates to making decisions under stress and consequence, which isn't quite the topic we're here on today with motivation. But I've given a fair amount of my effort to trying to understand that topic as well. Why is motivation such a mystery for many of us? I think it's because we don't understand what causes people to be motivated or not to be motivated. In some instances, that's even ourselves, that we don't understand why we do some of the things that we do, or why we don't do some of the things we do, or why we procrastinate when we know there are things that we're supposed to be doing, or why we resist change when we know that change is inevitable and things are going to change around us, but we don't necessarily like it. So I think that the mystery is that we just don't really understand what pushes the buttons for people to create motivation. Now, before I get too deep into this, I want to give my confession, and my confession is that I really, through probably at least half to 3/4 of my career, didn't understand motivation either. I thought I did. I thought I knew how to motivate people, and in some instances I had success, and in many instances I had failure. But as I look back on it now, I think that was probably more by luck than by design, because my understanding of motivation truly wasn't founded in the psychology. It was just taking what I knew motivated me, or what I knew didn't motivate me, and then trying to apply it to other people. And sometimes it aligned and it worked, and sometimes it didn't align and it failed miserably. The big breakthrough for me in understanding motivation was probably more than 20 years ago, when I got introduced to a book and a cassette series by Dr. Dennis Waitley called The Psychology of Winning. And in this series, the cassette series or the book, Dr. Waitley talks about various aspects of human behavior and performance, and one of the things he talks about is motivation. And when he enlightened me on the foundation of motivation, it truly changed everything about how I look at people and what motivates them. So what is motivation? Motivation is an internal drive that compels behavior. And it is really important to understand that the drive for motivation is internal. Now, we can externally motivate somebody. You know, if you hold a gun to somebody's head and say, do this or else, then there's a chance that they might do it because they're motivated not to have the consequence of that. But true, lasting, performance-based motivation is an internal drive that a person develops on their own that drives motive or motivation. And everyone as I do these programs, like I did, it was at the CPSE Summit or the CPSE Excellence Conference last year, and that's where I gave the presentation on this topic. And by the way, I want to go ahead and throw a plug in now for the CPSE Excellence Conference in 2016, March 15 to 18 at the Carib Royale in Orlando. I will be there again in 2016, and thank you to CPSE for the faith and confidence to allow me the opportunity to be the closing keynote presenter on Friday. So a little plug, if you haven't been to the CPSE Excellence Conference, oh my goodness, it is one of the most amazing gathering of smart people that are highly motivated people that truly understand the passion for creating excellence within their fire service organizations, and that's contagious. And not to mention that the venue is just amazing, truly beautiful, beautiful setting. Come down to Florida in March, and they didn't ask me to do this plug for this. I'm telling you, it's just one awesome excellence conference. All right, so this last year when I was doing this, I asked folks, raise your hand if you know somebody who's highly motivated. And hands went up, and I said, "How do you know?" Well, they're energetic, they're enthusiastic, they're go-getters, they're always busy, they're always goal-oriented and pushing ahead. Okay, so who knows somebody who isn't motivated? And hands will go up, and I say, "How do you know they're not motivated?" And they say, "Well, they're lazy, they're bitter, they're cynical, they're angry, they do nothing unless they're told and only what they're told." I said, okay, so we can clearly create that delineation between those who are highly motivated and those who are not motivated at all. And the heads nod. And then I say, here is probably one of the greatest revelations that I learned from Dr. Waitley, and that is everyone we described on both ends of the continuum here are highly motivated. Both ends. Some are highly motivated to do positive and productive and great things. Some are highly motivated to do nothing. See, even the decision to do nothing at all is one that is based on motivation. Something creates the motivation to do nothing. Now, as I share with you the secret sauce of motivation, I want to throw a disclaimer out there. And the disclaimer is that the things that I'm going to share with you won't work for everyone. If a person has a mental illness, these things may not work. If the person has depression, these things may not work. If the person is on medication that changes the regulation of brain neurotransmitters and chemicals and hormones, these things may not work. And if a person is suffering from any kind of addiction, these foundations of motivation may not work as well. Now, that is not your ticket out to say, okay, the person who I'm dealing with has, mental illness, or they have depression, or they're on an addiction. If you don't know that, don't just dismiss them as being someone that you cannot work with or create an internal motivation for. Although we know there are people who have those afflictions, and some of these things that we're going to talk about that create the triggers that drive internal motivation may be deregulated if some of these things are in place. So we just kind of have to put that out there, that this is not the kind of thing that would work for everyone. there are two emotions that drive all human motivation. And this is probably another revelation that I learned from Dr. Whately as I was trying to understand motivation and what drives people to do things or not to do things. He boiled it down to simply explaining to me that there are just two emotions that drive all human motivation. And once you understand that everything that somebody does or doesn't do is based on one of these two emotions, then you begin to understand truly what is causing the basis of human behavior, be it positive, productive, forward-thinking, goal-oriented behavior, or that undesirable, lazy, cynical, bitter, non-productive behavior. One of the two emotions is fear. And I snagged this picture off the internet, and I thought, man, this is just like spot on appropriate. Fear is the dark room where negatives are developed, and that's negative mindset, negative behaviors, and I just thought that was kind of a cool pic to put up. But fear is one of the motivators. Now, what do people fear? They actually do surveys. They go around, they go to the mall and survey people. What's your favorite movie? Make the list of favorite movies. What's your favorite car? Make the list of favorite cars. What's your favorite vacation destination? Make the list of favorite vacation destinations. One of the questions they ask is, what do you fear? And then people will tell them, and then they make the list of fears. The number one thing that consistently rises to the top of the list for things that people fear, is the fear of public speaking. And you'd think, well, the fear of dying would be at the top of the list, but actually the fear of dying is number 7 on the list, and the fear of speaking is number 1. And you think about how bizarre this is, that people would be more afraid of giving the eulogy at a funeral than being the person in the box at a funeral. Now, what is it about public speaking that people fear so much? What is the foundation behind this? And it isn't just public speaking, obviously, that people fear, but it is fear as the motivator. People fear, and here's the list: failure, embarrassment, ridicule, criticism, consequence, rejection. People fear attention, and people fear success. And you might be able to put one or two more on the list of your own of things that cause you fear. And the odd one there is success. And why would people fear success? You think that people would want to be successful, but with success comes an expectation that people then fear I won't be able to live up to the expectations that others have of me because I have achieved a certain amount of success, which means then I have to be better the next time and then better the next time. So there's too much risk associated with that, so they'll just kind of stay low-key and off the radar because this success sets expectations that they are afraid that they're not going to be able to meet, and then that might lead to, again, criticism, consequence, and ridicule, and the other things that are on the list. When a person is gripped or controlled by fear, it leads to this list. They're pessimistic people, and I'm sure everybody out there listening, the heads are shaking as they're looking at this list. They're very cynical of other people and the organization and policies and procedures. It's very easy for them to see the image of failure, why this won't work, that'll never work, we can't do this, we tried this in 1972, it didn't work then, it won't work now. They're all gripped with worry. Well, what about this? What if this happens? What if that happens? And they kind of live in the what if land of seeing the downside of everything that could go wrong. They can be very indecisive because they know that a decision then leads to an action. An action then could lead to a consequence, and there's too much risk associated with that, so just don't make any decision at all. Often very full of self-doubt, of their own sense of inabilities which then again lead to consequence and ridicule and such. Very self-conscientious about what other people are viewing and thinking of them, because they're very aware of the fact that they could potentially be ridiculed or embarrassed. So they're very self-aware, and then it can lead to inaction, because you just don't want to do anything that can cause any potential consequence or embarrassment. So they could end up just literally coming to work and doing nothing, because the alternative of doing something could lead to a berating, a belittling, being shot down, criticized, things like that. The other emotion, the opposite of fear, is desire. And as Napoleon Hill taught us in the book Think and Grow Rich, desire is the starting point for all achievement. If you want to achieve something, you have to first to desire it. As you desire it, then you see it in mental imagery, and you see all the good that comes from that, and that begins the process of achievement. What do people desire? They desire recognition, reward, satisfaction, accomplishment, acceptance, happiness, success, and attention made both lists. People desire to be successful as well, and are driven toward success with that desire. And attention made both lists. So people can actually fear attention, and people can desire attention. You know, one of the most famous attention-related studies that I remember reading about was in a second grade class, where a teacher was using gold stars to reward children for doing the things that the teacher wanted them to do, be it, clean up your desk area, line up in time for recess, come back off the playground in time after recess, sit quietly in the reading circle, whatever it be. The teacher would reward the kids with gold stars. And I remember when my kid was in second grade, and we had a parent-teacher conference, and we went to school. Man, he dragged me down the hallway by the hand and took me into his room, and he looked at that. He took me over to that chart with all those gold stars, and he said, "Daddy, look how good I am." School had only been in session about a month, and here was this beside his name, this row of 50, 60 gold stars, and I thought, who is this kid whose behavior is good enough to earn him 60 stars? This isn't the kid I know at home. And the teachers know that the performance that they desire, they reward, and then it is reinforced. So this study that I remember reading about was a group of psychologists that come into a second grade classroom, and with permission of the parents and the school administration and the teacher, had the teacher withhold the rewards, withhold the gold stars from the kids. In other words, no matter what the kids did, if they cleaned up their area, sat quietly in the reading circle, come back in time from recess, they didn't get any gold stars. And what they saw happen was the kids started to act out, because the kids were desiring attention. And the attention that they were getting when their performance was acceptable was the gold stars and maybe a little verbal attaboy. And when they had that withheld, they started acting out and behaving in undesirable ways. So you put that into the work setting, and you sometimes see people who are acting out for the sake of getting attention. They're misbehaving, they're not following the rules, they're playing the victim, so that when they get that attention, they say, "Oh, look at me, oh, poor me, look, the boss doesn't like me, the boss is treating me poorly," and it's all about getting the attention that comes from being from misbehaving. And in fact, I truly believe, and I say this often, is that I think in organizations there are people who have issues, and when they're complaining about the issues and somebody offers them advice, it just annoys them, because they don't want their problems solved. What they want is the attention that comes from having a problem. And when you try to offer them an advice about how to fix the problem so they can get on with life and on to better things, they seem to be put out by that, and because they're so content with having the problem and all the attention that comes from having that problem. So when we're driven by desire, desire leads us to be optimistic, enthusiastic, full of hope, where we actually desire change because we see with change there is opportunity, and we just love the whole thought of personal growth and development. Easy for a person desire-driven to become excited, use their imagination to see future successes, opposite of people that are fear-driven that see all the future failures. Very creative people, full of ideas, and in fact, the person who's desire-driven can actually be a challenge in an organization as well, because they're for so much as a person who's fear-driven may not want to contribute ideas to make the organization better. A person who is highly desire-driven may just always be coming with ideas and hey, let's try this. I saw this somewhere. I read this somewhere. I heard this. An organization was doing this, and you kind of have to be careful how you temper that, because if you're always shutting them down, you can destroy that motivation, that desire, that drive to share that creativity. So we have to, try to find a way to temper that and give them encouragement for being so visionary and so creative, but at the same time, we know that not everything that they want to do is things that we can do in an organization for the limitation of resources and time, money, people, things like that. And then people who are desire-driven are very goal-oriented and very achievement-driven. And sometimes that can lead to them becoming frustrated, because in some organizations these people don't receive an opportunity to set goals, to drive them to a new level, that they don't have the type of supervisor who will sit down and say, what are the 3 goals or 5 goals that you want to accomplish in the next 60 days or 90 days or 6 months or 1 year, and then use the performance review to kind of come back and look at the goal setting process. And in an organization that is absent or devoid of that process, a desire-driven person can kind of become despondent, because they're so goal-driven and so achievement-driven that it kind of can disenfranchise them when the organization doesn't offer them the ability to be goal-driven. Fear inhibits personal growth. A person who is gripped by fear, you'll often hear this person saying, and if they're not saying, they surely are thinking it, I can't do this. I can't do this because, and they'll have all the excuses. Well, I see a risk if we do this, and here's all the ways that this can go wrong. Oh, I have to do this, and I have to do that. It's a person that's not doing it because they want to do it, because they have to do it. And they're always full of wishes. Well, I wish it, I wish it didn't have to do this. I wish it could be this way. I wish the organization was different. I wish we were more like that town over there. I wish my boss was more like the boss I used to have. Or they'll say, I'll try. I'll try instead of I will. Well, I'll here's what I need you to do. Well, I'll try. But just very non-committal. It's it's not much motivation in saying I'll try. One of the things I do when I'm working with my kids is, when my kids say I'll try, I say, I want you to say I will. That's a very different level of commitment than I will try. And the fear-driven person will say this won't work because of this or that or this or that, and they actually have a skill set for finding all the ways that things won't work. And in fact, I had in one of my organizations a person who was so negative that when I would get an idea and I would take it to my staff, and my staff would say, or somebody else had an idea and we'd bring it to the staff meeting and we'd talk about it in the staff meeting, and as the staff we'd say, hey, good idea, we should pursue this. I always went to the negative, that person that negative person and ran the idea past them and had them have them tell me all the ways it won't work and all the ways it'll fail and all the reasons we can't do that. Because if I personally have a genetic defect, and that is I am like missing the pessimism gene in my DNA. I can't see some of these negative things. And when you get a person who's driven by their pessimism gene, they can see the negative in everything. And that person, unbeknownst to them, as negative as they were, actually ended up being an asset to me, because they allowed me to see things that I otherwise would not have been able to see or anticipate. So when they would tell me, here, it won't work because of this or this, I just start taking notes of all the reasons, and I was often just stunned and amazed at how many different ways they could find the negativity and the holes and the things that we want to do. But then that allowed us to go back to the drawing board and say, hey, let's make sure that this concern is addressed, and this concern is addressed, and this concern is addressed. And sometimes with the negative people, we just quickly dismiss them, ignore them, or shut them down. And the truth of the matter is, if you have a hyperactive optimism gene, that negative person can actually help bring balance to your understanding, because things are always not as rosy as we often think or wish or hope or want them to be. And that negative person just helps to bring that balance. And finally, fear can also cause a person to attack the person who is creating the fear. It's almost, if you want to go all the way back to the cave dweller and the fight or flight syndrome, or the fight or flight response, what we fear, we will either aggressively attack, or we may cower and run from it, or hide from it, as some employees who are gripped by fear hide from responsibility and hide from bosses. But the person gripped by fear can also attack. Now, as I talk about attack, I'm not talking about physical attack, although physical attack can happen. I'm talking more of verbal attack. And not only am I talking about verbal attack, but I'm also talking about verbal attacks that use sniper tactics. So the fear inhibited person often will attack, but not in an overt way. In other words, not face-to-face in a way that creates conflict or confrontation, but rather they'll talk in very uncomplimentary ways about the boss or about the policy that is being proposed, because they're afraid of something. They're afraid they won't be able to do it. They're afraid that they'll look like a failure and maybe be embarrassed or ridiculed. But instead of coming and talking openly about that fear with the boss, what they'll do is they'll sniper and talk about it behind their back and try to build allegiances and alliances of others against the boss or against the boss's policy. And again, all motive-driven behavior. That negative, cynical, snipering employee is motive-driven. It may not be the motive that you want, but they surely are motive-driven. Desire compels personal growth. A person who is highly desire-driven is the kind of person who would say or think, well, I want to do this. I want this new challenge. I want this new opportunity. And instead of saying, I'll try, they say, I can. And they see the opportunity, and even the greatest challenges of an organization, they don't look at it and say, oh, this is doom and gloom. This is an opportunity. It's an opportunity for us to look at retooling, reinventing. As had the economic downturn, a lot of fire departments, really went through some challenging times, and some organizations that I know took that as a challenge, as an opportunity to reinvent the way they do what they do, and to look at things and say, in light of the circumstances that we have now, politically and economically, can we sustain what we do the way we've always done it? And the answer, when they found the answer to be no, they saw that as an opportunity to reinvent, instead of going and complaining and which didn't solve anything. They sharpened their pencil and sat down and said, how do we do things in a different way? We didn't deal these cards, but we have to play these cards. Let's play them the best way that we can for the best outcome. So the person desire-driven says, I will get this done, and with enthusiasm they say, I get to do this and I get to do that. And it's a mindset that they see the excitement and the enthusiasm of getting to do things. When an awesome fire service leader is the chief of the South Bend Fire Department, and I had an opportunity to hear him address a group of firefighters, and he was talking. He came up through the ranks in South Bend, and eventually became the chief. And he was with a group of firefighters, and one of the firefighters asked him, Chief, what do you attribute your success of coming up through the ranks and eventually becoming the chief of the fire department? And he said, without hesitation, he said back when I was a newer firefighter, he said a very experienced firefighter came to me and said, son, if you want to climb to the top of this organization, the first thing you have to do is volunteer to do things that no one else wants to do. So when a boss comes to you, an officer comes to you, the chief comes to a group of people and says, we need somebody to do X, and whatever that X is going to be something so undesirable that everybody's going to wince and turn away and say, ooh, I don't want anything to do with that. You be the one to turn forward and take a step up and say, I'll do that. I'll take that. I'll get that done. And he said, and I followed that advice. And that advice has made all the difference for me throughout my career. Whenever there was something that needed to be done and nobody wanted to do it, I saw it as an opportunity and I stepped up. And what an amazing mindset. And he became chief at I would call relatively young age. And I think that this desire, motivation from within really drove him to that level of success. So how do we know what others fear or desire? How do we know? We can assume. We can look at them and say, well, I know that person is driven by this or driven by that. I know they fear this. I know they like that. But a better way than assuming would be simply to ask them. Yeah, that's right. Communicate. Ask them. Have a conversation. Now, you get somebody who's performing in an undesirable way, that conversation can't go like you walking up to them and saying, so, what's your problem? You seem to be unhappy. That's not the kind of communication that's going to get you to the end result that you need to have. What you need to do is you need to climb the mountain. And it's a steep mountain. It's a tough climb. The mountain starts with, at the base of the mountain, communications. Having communications, meaningful, sincere communications with other people. And after you have communications with those people for a while, you develop a relationship. And then the communications continues once the relationship is developed, and eventually you can climb to the top of the mountain where you find trust. Now, this is a very steep climb. For some people are very trusting. Some people are very untrusting, very guarded. Usually the people that are untrusting and very guarded are the people who have some point in their life, maybe not even related to the organization that they're serving in now, have given trust, and that trust has been betrayed. And they are therefore guarded about giving their trust to anyone else. And for so much as you try with communications and relationship building, if that person truly is deeply hurt and guarded, then it might not have anything to do with anything that you've done. You may never get to trust. But once you get to trust, if you're able to, that is where then the person can truly reveal to you what drives them. What is their motivator? What are their fears? What are their desires? What are their goals? What are their ambitions? Where do they want to be? What do they want to do? Be careful, though. Once you get there and you start asking those questions, you might find out things that are not consistent with what you would have wanted the answers to be. I had an employee once that once I got to trust, and I said, where do you want to be? He didn't want to be a firefighter, but he was one because his dad was one and his grandpa was one, and therefore he felt like he had to be one. And his heart wasn't in it, and it was pretty obvious that it wasn't in it, but I never really knew where his heart laid until I got to the point where I had enough trust and a relationship that was built over time that he actually told me that there was something else in life that he wanted to do other than being a firefighter. And so what I did is I asked him how I could help him get to that place that he wanted to be. What could I do? What could I how could I support him? Could I write a reference for him? Could I open some doors that could help him to get employed in this area that he wanted to work in because he didn't want to be a firefighter? And it was showing in him, and it was showing to other people around him, and he was unhappy and he was making other people unhappy, and but it took a while to peel back the layers of the onion, so to speak, to truly get to the core issue of understanding. And that took trust. And, you know, based on a person's history of being trusting and being rewarded with it, they may be quick to trust others. But if they've been trusting and betrayed, then it may be very difficult for that person to open up and share truly what their, you know, what their pinch points are, what is their desires, what are their fears. The next resource I want to have the listeners aware of, you know, the first one was Dennis Waitley's Psychology of Winning, is the work from Daniel Pink and his book Drive. Now, if you have not been to YouTube and seen Daniel Pink's YouTube video, go there and put in his name and put in Drive and just watch the video of what he discovered in his research about what motivates people, what drives people. And I'm going to give you the thumbnail summary, but you really need to read the book and you really need to watch the video. But Daniel Pink said basically there are three things that drive people to passionately achieve whatever goals that they have. The first is autonomy. Autonomy is self-control. Autonomy is being in charge of your own destiny, setting your own direction, setting your own goals, determining your own level of achievement, and having control over that. The person who is most likely to destroy an employee's motivation because they take away the autonomy is the micromanager. The micromanager is the person who controls everything, and anybody who's ever worked with or for, been around a micromanager, you know just how demotivating and demoralizing that is, and that's because they take away the autonomy. The employee is no longer in control of anything of their own. They can't do anything without the boss's approval, and often, even after the boss gives the approval, the boss comes back around and criticizes that work as not being good enough to the boss's expectation. The second the three components that Daniel Pink says drives people is mastery. Mastery is a person's ability to achieve excellence in their craft or in their trade. And the only way to get to that mastered level is through training and experience. So in organizations where employees are highly encouraged to train, to take classes, to continually be on a path of self-improvement and self-betterment, these people are highly driven toward the mastery part of motivation, because they always are trying to find a way to be a little better, to build excellence into what they do every day a little bit more. And in some organizations, they don't encourage this. They absolutely discourage it. I was just recently in a conversation with a firefighter who was very frustrated. He says, "Rich, I don't know what to do. We want to train, but our administration won't let us train. Even the training chief won't let us train." And I think, and he was very despondent, very uninspired by this. And we talked about a lot of the reasons why that might be happening, but we are driven to try to be our very best, to be excellent at what we do, which then leads to being liked, being respected, happiness, success, all those desire-driven motivators keywords that I had spoken to earlier. The third component of the three that Daniel Pink talks about is being driven by purpose. Purpose being the belief that what you do has a higher benefit than to you personally. In other words, what you're doing is going to make a difference in some way in the world or in society or in your community or in your family. In other words, it's getting outside of your own personal needs and desires and ambitions and realizing that what you do makes a difference for other people. And there's probably very few professions that can have more opportunity to be purpose-driven than as first responders, although some first responders become very disenfranchised and very cynical about the difference that they're making in the lives of citizens, especially on many calls that are routine and mundane, and they start to feel like they're not really making a difference, where in fact they're making a difference on every call for someone. And that purpose-driven individual sees that every time they have an opportunity to interact with someone else and the capacity of their profession, it is a chance to make a difference in that person's life. It may not be big and massive and all life-changing difference, but they have the opportunity to positively influence a person on that day, in that touch, at that moment in time. So autonomy, mastery, and purpose is what we learn drives people from Daniel Pink's work. So what sucks the motivation out of our members? That's something to give some thought to. What is it that takes away an individual responder's motivation from the inside out? I borrow this next lesson from two sources. One, Patrick Lencioni's book, The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, and two, Dave Ramsey's book, Entree Leadership. Now, you might notice that in all of these books that I've mentioned, they are all #1 New York Times bestsellers. That's just coincidence. Perhaps, it's not, I didn't choose them because of that, but in these books are many of the answers to the challenges or the secret sauce of motivation. And what I'm going to do is then take some of the 5 dysfunctions and some of Entree Leaders and put together a combined list of what sucks away the motivation of our members. And then you can judge your organization on these and determine if there's some opportunities to improve in any of these areas. So one of them is poor communications. Poor communications sucks the life out of people because they don't know what to expect. They don't know, they're living in a vacuum of information. And in the absence of information, then people begin to assume facts and data, or become very frustrated and very confused and very agitated because people are not sharing the facts with them. And so poor communications is one of the key ways that motivations get sucked out of people. Even good people want to be communicated on mission and vision and core values and direction of the organization, and what is happening in the budget, what is happening in politics, and what is happening in regional cooperation and efforts, just on and on, the opportunity to be better communicators. The lack of shared purpose. The purpose may be known by the leader of the organization or a small, tight circle at the top of the organization, but that purpose needs to be shared all the way down through the organization, because that purpose is what gives the organization a direction. It's what gives the folks that are working there a target to shoot for, to have to look forward to something with ambition and say, this is the purpose of why I'm here. It kind of ties to Daniel Pink's purpose. What is our purpose? Why are we here? What are we trying to accomplish? What are the goals of our organization? And sometimes those goals, kind of again tying back to poor communications, are not shared. It's kind of like we're on a need to know basis, and you don't need to know. Well, I don't know if it's possible to overshare information with employees when it comes to trying to get accurate, timely information into their hands. I realize there is some information we cannot share, especially things that are pending contract things, personnel issues, medical issues. These things, they're non-negotiable. They can't be shared. But a lot of things that can be shared are not shared because people perceive power with hoarding knowledge, and as they hoard the knowledge, it becomes very unmotivating for those who are on the outside who don't know. Gossip and rumors. In the absence of accurate and timely and complete information, people will start making things up, and as they make things up, rarely are the things that they make up founded in truth, and they're often not accurate. But in the absence of truth and accurate information, then the gossip and the rumors start to overrun the organization, and those gossip and rumors are often very hurtful to people within the organization, and it can destroy their motivation. Even innocent people on the sidelines can get drawn in and hurt and harmed when gossip and rumors are spinning around an organization. Unresolved disagreements and conflicts. In organizations, there's always going to be disagreement. There's always going to be conflict. And in fact, I would go as far as to say, in any organization, disagreements and conflict are healthy to an organization. If you have no disagreements and you have no conflict, then you're not really getting the input of members, because they're too afraid to speak up. There's always going to be people with differing points of view and differing opinions and differing ideas, and this is going to lead to disagreements and conflicts. But if no one ever speaks up and it's always yes, whatever you say, yes, whatever you say, well, that's not healthy to the growth of an organization, because there's going to be people with really good ideas, and their really good ideas are not going to be shared because they fear what's going to come to them if they disagree or if any conflict is created. So we have this conflict that's unresolved, burning issues in an organization, and the reason it's unresolved is people don't know how to disagree without being disagreeable, and there is a big difference between disagreeing and being a disagreeable person. And people don't know. People haven't been taught how to disagree. People have not been taught how to have healthy conflict, and then how to bring that healthy conflict to resolution. I was just at the VCOS symposium in Florida, and Randy Kern, a firefighter battalion chief in Florida, was given a presentation on how to have conflict, how to resolve conflict in meaningful, productive ways. And he wrote a book, and the book is just awesome on how to resolve the conflict of folks in the fire department. And it's like, wow, what a skill set to be able to teach someone how to disagree and how to have conflict and how to resolve it in meaningful and productive ways without destroying motivation and without destroying relationships. And sanctioned incompetence. Sanctioned meaning permitted incompetence. Within organizations, there are people who are substandard performers, and when the bosses don't deal with those substandard performers, that incompetent behavior then becomes the sanctioned norm. It becomes the standard. And as highly motivated, highly performing employees are able to see those who are underperforming or those who are damaging the organization being able to freely get away without any consequence, then that becomes demoralizing and demotivating to the top performers when they see that these underperformers are not held accountable, that their incompetent behavior is tolerated and therefore becomes the norm. The absence of trust. Trust is difficult to build and hard to maintain. And while I didn't put the book onto the webinar here, I would encourage people to look to David Horsager's book called The Trust Edge. The Trust Edge. And David's done a lot of research on what causes people to trust others, what causes people not to trust, and what the value to an organization of developing and building trust, not only internal trust, but trust with external shareholders and stakeholders as well. And the absence of trust destroys motivation, because if you don't trust somebody, you're not going to want to do the things that they want you to do, because they're going to say, well, do this. Why? Because it's going to be good. Trust me. No, I don't trust you, because the last time I trusted you, you took advantage of me. You did things that were inconsistent with your word. You walk a walk, but you don't talk. You talk a talk, but you don't walk the talk, and you're not one that can be trusted. In this absence of trust, we're not likely to be compelled to do highly motivated things, especially if one of the reasons we don't trust somebody is we know they're going to take the credit for anything that we do. And if they take the credit and we're not getting the reward and the recognition, when that trust is destroyed because of that, well, then a person's motivation to try to take on anything new and exciting and contributing to the organization is not going to be there, because they don't trust that others are not going to harm them with their efforts. Fear of conflict kind of ties back to the previous one of not disagreeing, and sometimes people don't know how to have conflict, and therefore they fear the conflict, and therefore they avoid the conflict, and as they avoid the conflict, then they're not resolving the issues. So instead of taking the conflict head on and saying, you did this and I disagree and here is why, and having that professional conversation, that professional discourse, they just avoid it. The fear leads to avoidance of dealing with it. Of course, that doesn't make it go away. It just then puts it into the unresolved category, because they're afraid to have that conflict. And most often what causes people to be afraid of conflict is they don't know how to have that professional discourse. Or maybe they've had a conflict with somebody before and that person beat them down, they embarrassed them, they yelled at them, they ridiculed them, and therefore they see the downside of having a conflict, therefore they choose to not have any conflict at all. They just learn to go into coping mode and just kind of like shift into neutral and say, I'm not gonna say anything because it wouldn't do any good. This person who fears the conflict, especially with bosses, might be quick to complain to other people about the issue with the boss, but they wouldn't go and have that conversation with the boss directly because they have that fear of conflict. Too risky, so they just avoid it. And then I think this is the final one, selfishness. Putting yourself first instead of instead of putting the higher purpose first. This ties back to Daniel Pink's purpose, a purpose above self, having a goal to achieve that's greater than your own. And people that are selfish it's all about me. It's all about my personal ambitions. What's in it for me? If there isn't anything in it for me, then I'm not on board. I have to benefit personally. I have to benefit financially. I have to know that if I do this work, that I'm going to get the credit. And when a person turns all that onto themselves, they can get very self-absorbed and very, very selfish, and in some fire service organizations, I have seen this selfishness, that there are people who if it isn't good for their personal agenda, then they're not on board with it. So why do some employees not do what they're supposed to do? I got 15 reasons here. But before I get to these 15 reasons, Tom, I hope you're monitoring. I'm going to pause for just a moment and see if there might be any questions to this point, because I don't even know that I've inhaled and taken a breath of fresh air in the first hour of this. So I'll just pause for a moment. Are there any questions?
No questions at this time. No.
Okay, good. All right. So what I want to do now is I have a list of just some potential reasons why employees might not do what we would want or think they're supposed to do. So the first one is that they don't know why. They don't know why they should do it. And if you think that might be the explanation as to why they're not motivated to do it, take some time to explain to them what the big picture is and how their contribution relates to the big picture. Sometimes we assume that because we see a big picture, everybody sees the big picture that we see. And that's not the case. The big picture might be in my head, but that doesn't mean the big picture isn't in everyone else's head. And taking the time to share that big picture and paint that picture can be very beneficial, including detailing the consequences, both positive and negative, or the reinforcement for positive or consequence for negative, to them personally, and then how the organization's results could lead to better performance or poor performance. Maybe they don't know how to do something. We shouldn't assume that somebody just knows how to do something automatically. Even if they've been there a long time, you say, well, they should know how to do this, or they should know how to do that. Or somebody new coming into the organization who's been through the academy, they should know how to do this or how to do that. That's not necessarily the case. I guess you shouldn't assume that they do know how, and certainly don't think that telling them how is the same as teaching them how to do it. Oftentimes we get into the telling mode, and without really assuming the mindset of a teacher. And one of the things that we could do is just to ask them in a very diplomatic way to describe how it is they think something is supposed to be done, whatever that task or assignment is, and then maybe even ask them to demonstrate to us how they would do it. And then we might be able to see the gaps in their understanding as they explain it to us, and as they demonstrate to us how they would do it. We might then be able to see an opportunity to show them how to do it in a way that meets our expectations. The employees don't know what they're supposed to do. And again, I would say don't assume that they do know what they're supposed to do. And again, don't think that just telling them is the same as teaching them what they're supposed to do. Here, like the previous one, ask them to describe what they think it is that they're supposed to be doing under certain circumstances, or on a particular project, or in training, to see if you have clarity in the understanding of your expectations to their expectations. And you might come to a revelation there that your understanding of what they're supposed to be doing and theirs don't necessarily align. They may think that your way of doing it isn't going to work. Especially as you get into administration and you get out of the field, they might get, well, you're a little bit out of touch with the real world and the things that are really happening. I don't think that they, that what they're proposing is necessarily going to work. And the truth of the matter is, it may not work. Our way is not necessarily a way that is going to work, even though we want it to work, even though we have it into our mind it's going to work, even though we're the boss and because I said so, you'll make it work, doesn't necessarily mean it's going to work. If we genuinely think that our way is the best, then we have the burden of proof to prove it to our employees. And it's not because I said so is not the burden of proof. It's showing and demonstrating that our vision of what we want to do is viable and workable. They may think that they have a better way. Oh boy, I think we've all met the person who thinks they have a better way. And you know what? They may really have a better way. Their way of doing it may be better than the way that we thought. But we have to set our ego aside and our bravado aside and our bossly mindset aside and realize that an employee can actually have a better way of doing it than what we thought was the best way. And we can actually learn from them a better way of doing it. If the employee thinks that their way is better because of misinformation or because there's some misunderstanding about what the objectives are or what the organization's values are, then again, for us as the bosses, the burden of proof is on us to explain to the employee, why we think that the way that we're proposing something be done is better, but to be open-minded to their ideas as well. And in fact, there could be more than one way to do something. So maybe we could ask them to give a good faith try to what we're trying to accomplish and say if it doesn't work, we'll learn from it. Then maybe we'll try your way, and if that doesn't work, we'll learn from that. Maybe we'll find a compromise somewhere in the middle. It doesn't always have to be the boss's way, except for a boss who's gripped with ego and bravado. There are many ways to get something done. They think that something else is more important, and sometimes people are just not dialed into the purpose and the mission and the values and the direction of the organization, and people who can sometimes become selfish sometimes think that what they have to do is more important, and then results in an opportunity to teach and explain the organization's priorities, and that might not be them shopping on eBay when there's work to be done. They might think, well, there's no reward if I do it right. If I do it right, there's nothing in it for me. There's no recognition's going to come, no reward is going to come, and they might be right. So we should try to design a work environment that frequently reinforces the positive behavior. I'm not saying use the gold stars like they do in second grade, but there are very many ways to find fun ways and very motivating ways to let people know when they're doing the things right that the organization and the leaders want to have done. Sometimes people do a lot of things right, and then no one ever comes up and says, good job. And people say, wow, I don't need somebody to tell me to do a good job. Just doing the good job is good enough. You remember that attention was on both the fear and desire list as to what drives behavior. And we desire that attention, that when we do a good job, somebody's going to say, not every single time, not over wearing it out kind of thing, but to say, none of us suffers when somebody says, I appreciate you. I appreciate the work that you've done here. I appreciate the effort that you've given here. They outwardly might say, oh, and in fact, what they're often likely to do is say, oh, it was nothing. Oh, it was no big deal. We self-deprecate because we're so uncomfortable with receiving the compliment, and where in reality the person who's comfortable with it, when somebody says you did a good job, our response should be, thank you. I worked really hard on that and I appreciate you recognizing that. But what we do instead is we self-deprecate. Oh, no big deal. Oh, don't worry about it. Oh, it was nothing. Somebody does a favor for us and we thank them. They say, oh, it was nothing. Well, it wasn't nothing. It was something. But we dismiss it, we downplay it because we don't even know how to accept compliments when compliments are given to us, because they're probably given to us so infrequently we don't even know how to deal with it. They may think that they're doing things right. They may not be doing things right, but they may think that what they're doing is right. And they may say, well, this person does it this way, and you think that that's okay, but when I do it the same way, you say it's not okay. Where in fact maybe what they're doing isn't the same way. Maybe two people that are being judged, as peers or equals, aren't necessarily equals. They're not equal in knowledge, skill, ability, dedication, commitment, attitude, and maybe they don't realize that their workload is different from someone else's workload, or that someone else gets a little, I don't say special treatment, but they get more opportunities because they create their own opportunities with their enthusiasm and their ambition. Someone could be unmotivated because they're rewarded for not doing it right. How do you get rewarded for not doing it right? It's the absence of accountability. It's the absence of consequence. It's the unsanctioned incompetence. If a person, look at two people. Two people on duty together. One goes out and does the truck checks. The other one goes in and sits on the lazy boy and watches TV. And then there's no accountability for the person who chooses not to do the work. That unto itself becomes a reward. That person is rewarded for not doing the work. And you think about it, who's the foolish one? The one who's out doing the truck checks, or the one who's sitting on the couch? They're both making the same amount of money. I mean, assuming the money is not necessarily the motive, but I mean they're both receiving the same benefits, one for working and one for sitting. So we can actually be rewarding people for not doing what we want them to do. They anticipate the negative consequences for doing it right. They do it right, and then there is still some consequence for them, even though they've done it right. And one of those, it might be that somebody else takes the credit, and it might be that the boss still berates you and belittles you even though you've done a good job, because maybe they're jealous of the fact that you're getting attention because you've done things well, and they just can't get themselves over that hump of realizing that somebody else could actually get the credit, and so they berate you or belittle you, or say, oh, that was easy, anyone could have done it, or a variety of negative feedback that is seen as consequence. And with enough of that, we just stop trying. We just stop doing things. We'll find ourselves saying, I'll just sit here until I'm told to do something, because no matter what I do, it's gonna result in a negative outcome and a consequence. There is no consequence for poor performance. When somebody performs in a negative or undesirable way, there is no accountability. This is that lack of or the sanctioned incompetence that I talked about. And for the people who are highly motivated, they see these people who are poor performers that have no accountability, and then they start to say, why am I doing this? Why am I busting my hump? Why am I breaking my back, coming in and doing all this and all this and all this and all this, and this person does nothing, and they get the same things I get, and that can sap away the motivation. Some of the reasons that people may not do things is there may be obstacles beyond their control. So one of the things to do as a boss is our job as bosses or managers to remove those obstacles that are preventing our employees from performing. And the only way to know those obstacles, again, is communication, relationship, trust, getting them to where they would share with us what those obstacles are, and then help to develop a strategy to overcome whatever those obstacles are, to either overcome them or work around them or work within them, with them present. We can't fix everything. We can't fix every problem. A person may be unmotivated because they have personal limits. Those personal limits may be fears, phobias, physical or mental incapacities, or lack of fitness that is keeping them from being able to do their job in a way that is to expectation, which may be demoralizing to them. They may be embarrassed by it, therefore they avoid doing work that they know they can't get done because others will see it and criticize them because of it. It's like one department that put a policy in that says everybody's going to get a physical examination to make sure that they're fit for duty, and you think, well, that would be a good thing, that just to be checked by a doctor to make sure that you're healthy and capable of doing the job, and if there's something wrong with me, they're going to find it and we get it fixed. And you'd be surprised how many times employees will just go ballistic off the deep end and say, no, I completely oppose physicals, because the fear is that the physical is going to reveal, the physical abilities test is going to reveal that employee can't perform the duties of the job. And chances are they know it already, and that's why they attack the process, they attack the policy, they attack the individual who suggests that somebody get a physical examination or do a physical abilities test. And then people actually just may have some deep-seated personal problems. And in fact, people say, well, you should leave your home problems at home when you come to work. Well, until you can take a brain out of a person's head and leave it on the shelf at home and put a different brain in their head when they come to work, it's very difficult to leave home issues at home. Some people are better at it than others. Some people have such deep-seated, challenging home issues, it's hard to leave them at home because they're always on their mind. They're always eating at them. They're always challenging them. And the only way for you that you would ever know this is if you could get to trust where a person might reveal some of those very personal issues. Now, it's not for us as bosses to solve, but it might be a way for us to refer that employee to somewhere else that could help them, some form of counseling or intervention that could get them the help that they need. And perhaps they're not doing something because we've asked them to do something that no one can do. We've set the bar so high and the expectations at such a level, maybe we can do it, but no one else can. And we set the bar that high because we know that we can achieve it, but others are not adequately prepared, educated, equipped to do it. And we set an expectation that's so high that what we're doing is setting up failure, maybe almost with intent, knowing that if we set the bar that high, no one will be able to accomplish it, which will make me look better because I'm the only one who's that good, and it'll give me ample opportunity to criticize and ridicule all the inferior people who can't do things. And you can easily see how that could destroy motivation. So what's the process for improving motivation? What's the process for improving performance? Well, we'd start with, borrowing from Stephen Covey and his 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, seek first to understand and then to be understood. Oftentimes as bosses, we try very hard to get the people to understand what we need them to do and how we need them to do it and when and where, without first asking questions and understanding, do they know how to do their job? Do they know what to do? Do they understand the purpose? Do they understand the mission? Do they understand the vision? Do they understand the core values? I'm not saying tell them what they are. I'm saying ask them what they are. And as you ask them what they are, you might find out that the reason that they're not squarely behind the organization is they don't understand where the organization is at and where the organization is going. Seek first to understand by asking questions first, and then to be understood by teaching. If you have somebody who is underperforming, follow this 4-step process. First, teach them the right way to do things. After you teach them, then you coach them. Just think about little kids first learning how to play t-ball. They don't even know how to hold the bat. They don't know how to hold the bat on their shoulders. They don't know how to hold their hands together. Maybe they hold the fat end of the bat instead of the thin end of the bat. They don't know. They need to be taught. Teach first. Once you teach them how, then you coach them. You coach that performance to be better. Once you teach and you coach and the performance is still inadequate, then you counsel. Counsel is setting deadlines. Counsel is setting expectations. Counseling is setting goals, and then giving some encouragement and direction and constant feedback. Counseling toward better improvement. And then finally, and only finally, discipline. All too often we jump to discipline. Discipline's the fear motivator. Discipline is the or else motivator. The discipline is the do this or there will be a consequence. It's the easiest way to try to change behavior, but it's also the least lasting way. People will change their behavior only for so long as they fear when discipline is used. Think of it this way. You're traveling down the road at 75 miles an hour. The speed limit's 55. A cop comes down the on-ramp behind you. A marked police car. You see the police car. What do? You slow down to 55. Fear, consequence is in the rearview mirror. The cop exits off the very next exit. What do? Back up to 75. Radio gets turned up. Hand on top of the wheel, kick back, relax. There's no longer fear of discipline. Discipline can motivate, but it is a temporary motivator and often damages the trust that then brings you down the mountain to the point where you may not even have communications with someone anymore. And it's hard to climb back up to the mountain of trust when you're not communicating. You can't force motivation onto anyone other than fear, which is a temporary motivator. And we want that motivation to come from within. We want that to be desire-driven motivation, not fear-driven motivation. All we can do is make the environment right where someone can be self-motivated, to create an environment where we give them encouragement and support and teach and give them direction and goals and then turn them loose and let them do what they can do. Give them the autonomy to be successful. But with autonomy comes great responsibility. And we must, when we give somebody the latitude to do their job the way we've taught them to do it, we have to have accountability. We have to hold people accountable for their actions. If not, we have that unsanctioned incompetence where people can do whatever they want. And we can't have that. We can't have that in an organization because that destroys motivation as well. So we give them the autonomy, teach them, give them the autonomy to do their job well, stay out of their way, let them do it well, coach them if they go off center, but always have accountability if their performance doesn't improve. So this is the secret sauce. This is how to understand human motivation. And the secret is, there really is no secret to this. It's just understanding the principles of what drives people to do the things that they do. Positive things, negative things, great things, terrible things. Everything that somebody does and doesn't do is all driven by motivation. Tom, is there any questions?
No questions.
Okay, we'll give it just a moment to see if there might be a question that comes in. There's my contact information. If I can do anything to help you or to help your organization understand these concepts, you know, it's a short webinar, and there's obviously more to all of these concepts of motivation. We just don't have the time to dig deep enough into them. But if I can help you or your organization in any way, there's my email. There's my phone number. There's my website. I have two. Situation Awareness is another website I have, but the one that you would be able to find information about speaking or coaching opportunities would be on the Rich Gasaway website. Tom, thank you for the opportunity to be on the webinar. Thanks to CPSE for all the opportunities that you have given me to contribute to the Excellence Conference, and I consistently provide the feedback. It is one of my most favorite conferences because you bring such smart and passionate and driven people together to all in one place and all for a singular purpose to make their organizations in the fire service better. And you just can't help but be jazzed up when you're in an environment like that.
Very true. Thank you very much, Dr. Gasaway, for today. And thank you, everyone, for participating in this session. And have a great day. Have a great Thanksgiving.
Thank you.